but they would always describe it as like, we need to diminish these behaviors. We need to work hard on crushing whatever this is and make sure she gets it out of her. But I think, which all of those people trying to work hard to like take these behaviors away when it's kind of already just a part of you, in your brain, it just internalizes it and it makes you feel more shame than necessary.
ADHD Rewired, episode 347. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. And you can learn all about our intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. You can do all of this at our website, ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Abigail Dube. Abby is a owner of a small corporation and is also training for her first amateur fight. She is a boxer. And because she has a difficulty picking a direction, she's hoping to branch out into content creation soon. So, Abby, we talked a couple weeks ago. I always asked people, so why do you want to come on the podcast?
Yeah.
Have you figured out an answer to that one yet?
I mean, probably a couple months ago, I started officially listening, and it just really resonated with me. All the guests that came on were like saying things that were like my life exactly, and they don't even know me or my life experiences. And yet like literally they could have described my life or the emotions that I was feeling or like the responses that came out of me. And I just was like, I think I need to do that. I really need to connect with this community. I need to find out more. Like I'm not alone.
So you have not been officially diagnosed yet.
No.
You are waiting for an evaluation. COVID has kind of gotten in the way of that. You are in Canada, so there's usually you have to wait a little bit longer for those evaluations, from what I understand. Yeah. You said that for most of your life that it really is very painful for you to have to hide kind of the challenges that you had, which you're now seeing are probably related to ADHD. In addition to not living up to your parents' expectations, and being a boxer. Well, just for listeners, I mean, so I'm sure that there's a element of maybe I just don't know boxing well enough, but I see you on screen and you don't strike me as someone who would be a boxer.
Yeah.
So
I get that a lot.
Yeah, you do.
You're not the only one.
Okay. So and how long have you been into boxing?
So I'm approaching 2 years. And I kind of got into it just as I was always attracted to it. I don't know why. It was something that for whatever reason, it was like calling me as well. I just really enjoyed the challenge, the risk taking. Every day there's something new to learn. There's something new that you can always work on. And it was very tangible for me to be like, live day to day. Because I'm very like, I want to build an empire tomorrow, that kind of mindset. So for the first time, I'm able to like, for the most part, pull back and be like, yeah, really just focus on what I need to do for this set amount of time. And boxing is very kind of like military in a way. You have your 3 minutes, you rounds this amount of time, boom, boom, boom. And it's very structured. So I think in a way I was kind of looking for that. But yeah, it's amazing. It's a lot. Amateur is very different from professional, first of all.
Okay.
So professional is like you earn big bucks, you're probably going to get knocked out. It's very intense. Amateur is much more of like an art form. It's more creative.
The way you describe it, it almost sounds like you're describing art. Like
it is, yeah. It's very technical. You want to score more points, right? I mean, if you get a knockout, super cool, but that's not the end all be all. You only get 1 point for that, right?
So, when you were younger, were you the type of person who got into fights?
I got in trouble a lot,
yeah,
honestly. Looking back, not like physical altercations, no. But oh my God, was I like getting in trouble with teachers and doing things, I should not be doing.
Like what?
For example, I had this one best friend in grade 1, and we would just be like goofing off. We went to the washroom. I think it was like during class time. And there's this older girl in the stall, and we were just like crawling underneath all the stall. And of course, we didn't realize that one was occupied. We were just busy like being crazy. So yeah, she was probably like grade 6, so a lot older than us. And we just like went underneath the stall and probably scared the living daylight out of this poor girl. We were just like, blah, these little.
I really thought you were going to say you scared the shit out of her. Then I was like, well, it's a good thing she was where she was.
In the washroom. Yeah. No.
I know I wasn't the only person that was thinking it. I just happened to be the one at the microphone who said it. So that didn't end well, I'm guessing?
To do, a full apology and go to the principal's office and get reprimanded.
Okay.
It wasn't terrible, but yeah, it was always constantly like walking the line of like getting into shenanigans and things that were probably a little naughty, I'm going to say, but would cover it up because, my parents are like pillars of the community, right? They're teachers. So it's a little bit of added pressure. Like when you're super bored and frustrated, and that's the way that you need to instigate something, or you need to get like drama going. I don't know how to describe it, that you need that something.
Stimulation. I mean,
yes.
That is definitely an aspect of ADHD, is that when our brain is under aroused, we will find ways to stimulate the brain. There's that phrase that I love about like mud wrestling with a kid with ADHD is like mud wrestling a pig. The only difference is, you both get dirty, but the only difference is the pig enjoys it. Right? Yeah. Right. So it's like, yeah, that stimulation is a maladaptive way, I guess, in some ways to stimulate the brain. So you described to me that up until very recently, you kind of just viewed that yourself as a failure, as a weirdo, loser. And these are not my words, just saying.
They're mine,
an attitude problem.
Yeah.
So you also shared with me a little bit about when you were in school, you were smart, but there were things that you did that the teachers were like, we're not sure if Abigail's what were some of those things?
Oh my God. Even since grade 1, just pulling back the report cards and being like, well, was this here all along? And the comments, are so telling because they were like, she clearly, when she's internally stressed, she is very fidgety. She chooses like not to listen, like selective hearing. And she has limited verbal responses. And I still do that today when I get frustrated, when I am like seeking stimulation. I'm like, nope, we're done. Bye-bye. it's seen as a rude, attitude thing now as an adult. But yeah, it's definitely more of like, I need to go do something else right now. So yeah, it kind of started there, but they would always describe it as like, we need to diminish these behaviors. We need to work hard on crushing whatever this is and make sure she gets it out of her. But I think, which all of those people trying to work hard to like take these behaviors away when it's kind of already just a part of you, in your brain, it just internalizes it and it makes you feel more shame than necessary. And I think I've carried that probably up until this point of being like, yeah, every year I would be told, oh, she's so smart. She's so this, the testing, I got tested basically like every year I was in school for reading, writing, comprehension, something like that, hearing, like everything. And it would always come back normal. So people were always asking, oh, can she do things? But never like, why isn't she doing things? Or why isn't she fulfilling our expectations? And I think it's frustrating having like that missing piece of being like, I need to do things in a particular way, but never being able to access that. And I think it was always acceptable, for other kids to have, learning disability, having issues, because my parents would deal with that all the time. But when it's their kid, no, you have to be smart. Mm-hmm. You have to be this way.
And you told me that your dad would regularly kind of correct you and would tell you that, like, if Abby, if you do this, people aren't going to like you. Like,
yeah,
man.
Yeah, from a young, I feel like now looking back, I think he as well has ADHD undiagnosed. Because I was listening to you and Russell Barkley, the episode about how males with ADHD tend to be more aggressive and more abusive with their partners, more controlling. And he was definitely all of that. Plus super impulsive with finances. Like he's horrendous. He's so much debt. And looking back, it's just like, I think we were on the similar frequency of each other. I think that's why he said those things, because how he grew up, that's how he was able to cope. And he picked up on, oh, she's inherited this. Now we need to work on that. Because yeah, my sister, my mom, they never had those talks. They were always like on the same page. And it was always like my dad and I were always on the same page. And I remember, I think that's where a lot of shame too came from, was like, well, I don't want to be like this, terrible person, this person in my life who has caused us, all of us as a family, a great deal of pain. I don't want to be like that. But then internally, there's still that like, I don't want to describe it as a monster, but there's still that like being that like just wants to come out and you can't really, push it down for that long, know?
The whole idea of masquerading as normal is exhausting.
Yes. Oh, it's painful.
You said that when you were a kid in school, that you would write gibberish on your classwork just so you can finish and go to recess.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Oh, it's crazy. It's like a vivid memory of, I think I missed a day. I was sick or something. And so the teacher sat me down at my desk and was like, okay, you need to do this report. You need to write like a little story and draw about it. So I was like, well, this sucks. I don't want to do that. Everyone else is playing blocks. This is stupid. And I'm like, what are the chances that she's actually going to think this is worthwhile and read all of it? Probably really slim, right? So I was like, okay, I'll give her something. I'll write 2 full sentences, like comprehensive, and then the rest, I will just write straight up gibberish. And that will get me to where I need to go, which is playing blocks, and she will get something to put on the board. There we go. Everyone wins, right? Well, wrong, because everyone thinks I have dyslexia, or they think, oh my God, she has a serious learning disability. So yeah, it prompted a lot of testing, but I knew what I was doing. Just nobody asked me. So
it's fun because I've talked to a lot of people, and I know that I remember, I think it was second or third grade standardized tests, those bubbles.
Yeah.
That was an art project. I was filling out designs on those bubbles. I couldn't care less about
no,
it's, who knows? They probably a Tivers kid, make sure his test doesn't actually get turned in. They don't want to lower the average.
Yeah. Just shred that by accident. We lost it.
So you graduated high school, you went to college, and when you were choosing a program, you had some certain criteria that you were really that was really important to you.
Yeah. So college here also is very different from the States, I believe. So college is known as hands-on program, people who are kind of going into trades or different workplace kind of prepared scenarios. Whereas university is very much academia. You're going to go to masters or have a more, smart outlook on life. So yeah, I was automatically I knew from the get-go, I need something hands-on. I need college. And I decided, okay, what is going to be the least textbook heavy, least reading program I can find? So I found film and television. And the joke is that those with ADHD go into film and television because you need to be able to hyper-focus for a specific amount of time, sometimes 24 hours a day to 3 weeks. And then you just disengage, right? And you move on to different projects all the time. So it was a common joke. Looking back, I'm that's not so funny. So yeah, I picked the program with the least amount of textbooks. There was none, no reading, no anything. It was just buy equipment, show up, and, try. That's it. And it was 3 years. So I was able to get through that. But every year I would have to reevaluate and be oh my God, I don't even know if I can do this anymore. Because it still took so much out of you to be in that school setting. There were still lectures and tests. And I kind of, in order to get through that in high school, I would just rush through it as quickly as possible in order to do whatever I wanted to do or, get that stimulation back. And I was never able to really fix that, not even in college. And it was just always even with different accommodations, I would still be getting distracted in testing situations. This kid would be writing too loudly. Someone would be typing on a keyboard and I'd be oh my God, stop. Can't handle this.
Billy's breathing. Can you make him stop?
Yeah. I can't focus. That's not fair.
So you did finish the program, right?
I did. Yeah.
And I want to hear what happened after you finished the program and when you got into your first job. But before we do that, we got to take a quick break. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD reWired comes from the ADHD reWired community, which includes our 10-week intensive coaching and accountability groups that meets 3 times a week, and our alumni membership community, where members can join me for weekly sessions, partake in our adult study hall, meditation and breathwork classes, and more. We want to meet you. We want to hear your stories. Go to coachingrewired.com and click on the big red button to tell us how to reach you. Here is a graduate of our program and a current alumni sharing her story.
Part of the reason why I joined the group was for the accountability. Before even finding the podcast, which led me down this road, I had told my boss that I needed more accountability, I thought. because I couldn't get anything done and I didn't know how or why I wasn't able to do it. And so don't tell your boss that you need more accountability unless you have a plan to make it happen. That's really what shined a light on what the missing piece was. I knew what I should be able to do. I knew the techniques and the tools, and I just couldn't stick to them. And I think that the accountability with your accountability group within the whole ARC community and going forward, I know that I'm going to need that accountability still. And that's why I'm definitely joining the alumni group, because knowing just you guys in my group, I know that everyone else is the same. And I already feel like the love and the accountability too, still the questions of helping you to dig a little deeper and figure out, well, what is it? What's this little road bump about? Because that's really what I learned from one of the major things, is that stop trying new things and just stop and look and feel and pinpoint exactly what it is. I think the accountability, there's no replacement. There's no replacement for that, and there's no replacement for these wonderful people. ARC teaches the skills that pills don't teach and that nobody else taught us along the way. I'd been medicated for years and nobody really explained ADHD to me or even told me that I really needed to dig into it. They just said, here, take this medication. And yeah, it felt like it worked and it was good. And then, but I still had no ability to stick to a schedule. That's at the point where I had no idea what else to do because I felt like I tried everything else. And that's why I joined.
We are living in a very challenging time for everyone. It feels more challenging for those of us who live with ADHD. What are you waiting for? Go to coachingrewired.com and join the interest list for our winter coaching groups. Registration is by invitation only, so click on that big red button at coachingrewired.com to learn how to get invited to register. Join the coaching groups to try new things and find accountability from people just like you. Are you new to the podcast and want to learn more? Go to coachingrewired.com and we hope to meet you soon. All right, we are back with Abigail Dube. All right, so you made it through school.
I did.
Survived school.
Yeah, better words.
And you got a good job after college. Yeah. That you loved? You hated it?
I mean, it's one of those things that like I ticked off all the boxes that everyone was saying I should be ticking off, you know, all these normal milestones, but it felt so unfulfilling.
Like what?
You know, get your high school diploma, go to college or degree, get that, you know, get first job, get benefits, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, I'm, you know, in this killer job, downtown Toronto, super like posh and high tech, you know, I'm where I need to be. And yet I feel like I'm at the bottom of this like dumpster fire, you know, it just feels like my life is not where it should be. And the person before me was like just so organized and amazing and had everything, you know, down to a T. And I would just be like off in La La Land all the time. And, you know, my boss would be like, hey, do you need us to like explain things to you better? Do you just not understand how things work around here? And I would always feel like, oh my God, like I'm going to get fired. They're going to know something's wrong with me. You know, it was that underlying feeling of like, I'm not fitting in. I don't know why. And it's the constant vicious cycle of like, oh my God, what do I do?
It's like high anxiety probably all the time. Yeah.
Every day. And, you know, I loved talking to my coworkers and distracting them. I was notorious for that. But then when it came to doing paperwork or things I was actually supposed to do, I would leave it. I would constantly waste so much paper because it would just be riddled with mistakes. I'd be like, I don't understand what the problem is. She made it look so easy everyone else is functioning properly. Like, what is wrong with me? And, just causing different situations because we were with marketing and media. And so that industry in itself is a high stress industry. Those people are very high strung. And so when I wouldn't take the time to deal with those people, situations would come up and my boss would have to deal with that and would just be extra stress for them, and feeling that guilt of like, if I had just done, what I should have done before, or taken these steps and slowed down, these things wouldn't have happened. And it's constantly feeling like not worthless, but just the guilt of like, okay, I need to do better next time. I know I can do it. And then failing again and again.
How did you cope with that stress?
I know I broke down a lot in our company washroom, and I cried so many times where I was just like, it was too much. It was so overwhelming. And I just broke down. I kind of came to a head in the new year where I was like, this isn't working. I don't think I'm a good match for them, the employee that they need, or vice versa. And so I decided to move on to do my own business, and work for my friends, kind of doing like a subcontracted, very, just, on the whim. When I feel like I want to work, I can work. When I don't want to work, I can do what I need to do. And it just like blossomed. Yeah.
It was event planning. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. I know.
There's the whole like time management issue with ADHD, and then there's just really bad timing.
Yes.
Which no fault of your own. So you quit before you got fired from the previous job, right?
Yeah, I fortunately was never fired. It was just a feeling of like, they were kind of interviewing people who were kind of like similar job qualifications that I had. I'm like,
writing on the wall.
It wasn't just a coincidence. Maybe
so how did you come to learn that you might have ADHD?
Probably just recently with COVID. I was not doing what I was supposed to be doing, answering emails, and I was down.
So what was that Google search that you put in? Or you're like,
oh, I'm a YouTube fanatic.
Okay.
So this was all YouTube's algorithms for me. It just popped up one of Jessica's videos on literally signs you might have ADHD.
So what were you looking at? Like, what were you searching for on YouTube?
Just random commentary videos. It wasn't even ADHD related. That's the crazy part. So I never even thought, in a million years I would have it. So I clicked on it.
So you watched this first video, and remember what video it was?
It was like the 5 signs of that you might have ADHD. Okay. One of those ones.
Okay.
I'm like, well, I probably don't have it, but I'm interested in this. I want to watch it. It might be helpful for just information purposes. So I watched it, and as she was talking and explaining all of these symptoms and, life experiences that kind of go with it, I'm like, oh, shoot. Oh, shoot. That is me. Like, not even just 10%. That is me 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. And then I just kind of dove into it more and tried to research like everything I could. And every little test that you can possibly take, I'm like, oh my, that is definitely me.
What did you do with that information at first? Like, so you watched this video. Were you shocked? Were you like upset? Were you excited or angry? Like, what was going?
Yeah.
What were you feeling?
It was kind of a mixture, but definitely kind of a bombshell went off. And it's that feeling of like, oh my God, my whole life I had this community, or I belonged somewhere, or that missing piece finally that we found, and the puzzle's complete. And it's like, oh my God, it's amazing. It's exciting, but it's also a grieving process too of like, well, there's nowhere back to normal after that. You know, there's that person that my parents had probably hoped I would be. The person that even I hoped I would be, and trying to constantly work on this when, I mean, you can get it to a point of thriving, but it's not something you can diminish, right? And it's like taking that back look of like, oh, I'm not a bad person. I don't have an attitude problem. This is a real thing. That just was like mind blowing. So yeah, it's still a little painful to dive back into those childhood memories, into that school setting, because yeah, it was just a struggle every day.
Have you talked to your parents about this yet?
I talked to my mom, but yeah, I don't really have a lot of communication with my dad.
Okay. What did your mom say?
At first, her first reaction was like, I would have known, you know, I deal with these people every day. I would have known you're not like that. But it's one of those things that if it's so internal, and the conversations I was having with my dad more privately, she wouldn't have known, right? To edit my behavior, to always be super conscious of, am I palatable for everyone else? Am I being, you know, not too extra today? So it's one of those hard pieces of being like, no, Mom, I've always been like that. I've just been hiding it from you.
So yeah. It's sort of like you've had this very, a pretty ingrained script, and now you're realizing that someone handed you the wrong script.
Yeah, the wrong, I guess, rules or
like
the wrong
narrative,
settings.
You know, like the story that you're telling yourself about why these challenges are occurring. Was off, you know, it was, and this is such a common thing with ADHD when you're undiagnosed, is that, what is attributed to the behavior is just like, you know, it's clearly like you're a person of poor moral character, and it's just like, which is like, what can you do about that? Right?
Yeah. Like, how do you change that? That's so general. It's like, right. Be a better person.
And that's where shame is such a huge part of sort of this unraveling of sort of the emotional components of ADHD, and why I really, you know, the deeper I get into this work, you know, I've been doing this for a while, the more and as I'm exploring other areas of just like mental health, that like the role of complex PTSD, like in ADHD, I think is huge. Like as I'm learning more about it, I'm not like seeing it everywhere. It's sort of like, you know, when you get a red car, now you see all the red cars on the street, right? Yeah. It's like, oh my gosh, like this is so, I mean, it's something I sort of knew was there, which is it's one of the reasons why I think group is so effective as a modality for working on this. Because when you know you're not the only one, it's really healing. But it's like, I don't know, something about just the more I've been learning about this, realizing how important it is to know you're not alone, and to how important that healing work is in doing the more practical parts of managing ADHD.
Yeah.
Right.
I think like for a lot of people, because I'm still experiencing this, like, why wasn't I worthwhile enough? Why wasn't I important enough for someone to recognize that in me, or to see that, or to take a step back from, you know, test after test after test, and be like, well, what is the cause of this? You know, why isn't there this connection piece? What are we missing? And like, once you zoom out and see the big picture and the things that everyone has been saying year after year after year, it's like, well, why didn't anyone do that for me? Or why, you know, it's kind of attributed again to that. Was it something that I did wrong? And it's grieving over that too. Trying not to have that shame either, of like, well, why did they feel it was justified to diminish me or to put me in that box instead of just letting me, explore the ADHD weirdness. It's going to happen eventually.
One thing that I know can be helpful is when you sort of identify those old scripts, in your mind, the narrative that explains the things that you're doing or the things you're having a hard time with, and you're in that, your itty bitty shitty committee is kind of like, it's like, oh well, Abby, you just suck, and this is, it's give pause and be like, wait a minute, whose voice is that? Right? Mm-hmm. Is that my second grade teacher's voice? Is that my mom's voice? Is that my dad's voice? Whose voice is that? Because when you can recognize that, the stories that we tell ourselves so often are not our own stories, but we think they are. Mm-hmm. Right. And when we can recognize that, wait a minute, like this is somebody else's story. It's just, I've heard it so many times that it's become my own. You can now unravel it and let go of it as your own and begin to create a new sort of new narrative, one where you're really getting a deeper understanding of who you are, why you're struggling with certain things, and also like what the things that kind of turn you on and get you excited, and be like, yeah, and it's okay to do this even if a lot of other people aren't doing this and they think it's weird, right?
Mm-hmm. Like my parents thought, well, okay, especially my mom. My dad kind of got it. I would play, computer and video games 10 hours, like a long time, longer than most kids
mm-hmm.
would. And they were super concerned because I would like be absorbed in it. They're like, oh my God, she's going to get stupid. Like she's going to be, all these things. That was just how I needed to reset myself, day after day. It was, 10 hours.
Well, I when I used to do clinical work, I used to have parents, it was usually the dads who would be like,
right,
my kid can't have ADHD. He can sit in front of that video game for 8 hours. I'm like, that's actually not normal. Like, like most kids can sit in front of there for a couple hours, but like if he's seriously sitting in front of there for 8 hours and like doesn't get up to like take care of bodily functions, like like that's
anything, like drinking, eating, it feels like I'm tearing myself away. Like I can't.
Yeah. I mean, I know sometimes when I get into that hyper focus, especially from doing something that's sort of digitally oriented, the thing that snaps me out of it is like I get like suddenly get this massive headache, and I'm like, oh, I haven't drinking or eaten anything in hours, and like, and it's like.
Probably not normal.
Right. So, but you know what is normal? Taking a break right about now. So we will be right back. This podcast is brought to you by our patrons over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Patreon allows listeners like you to support independent content creators like me. As this podcast is free to you, the listener, it is not free to produce. I appreciate everyone who can financially support this podcast. If you are in a position to show your support for this podcast financially, you can do so by going to ADHDrewired.com and click on the Patreon tab at the top of the page. We have 6 new patrons this month, so I want to give a special thanks to Bogdan S. and the Sunny Unicorn at the $25 a month level, and Andrea S. at the $10 a month level, Sarah D. and Abator Blues at the $5 level, and Melita at the $3 a month level. Not sure if I pronounced all your names correctly, but thank you. I appreciate your financial support. Whatever you can give, I do appreciate it. And when you support ADHD Rewired on Patreon, you get cool perks starting at just $5 a month. And more and more patrons are becoming patrons at the $25 a month level. Because at that level, you can join me for a group coaching call with other patrons every 4th Tuesday of the month. Our next group coaching call is Tuesday, November 27th at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you can give just $10 a month, you can have access to the audio recordings of those Patreon coaching calls, plus a bunch of extra content. Plus, we still want to hear from you. If you want to get ad-free episodes for just $5 per month, let us know by voting on our Patreon page at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. We received a few more votes last week. So we are at the 18 yays, 16 nays, and one that is not a patron, but would become one if this option were available. Would you become a patron if there were ad-free ADHD Rewired episodes? Go vote on my Patreon page by going to ADHDrewired.com and clicking on the Patreon tab at the top of the page. If you are not in a position right now to be able to support this podcast financially, there are other ways that you can support us. Consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast player or hit that share button, because I bet you have a family member or a friend in mind that you think would benefit from hearing this episode. Copy that share link and send it to them as a text message. All of your support is appreciated. To become a patron, go to ADHDrewired.com and click on the Patreon tab at the top of the page. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks. If you are new to this podcast, we want you to know that we have 2 other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. Hacking Your ADHD with Will Curb drops every Monday, and Will is hitting a huge milestone this week with 1 year of podcasting. Congratulations, Will. His special podcast is an interview with his friend and fellow podcaster, Carrie Gormley. In this episode, you get to hear about some of his lessons learned from podcasting for 1 year. They talk about some of the systems he uses, Will's gratitude, and getting into some of the things like how long it takes him to produce an episode from start to finish. Join Will for this special episode. Check out his latest episodes and hit subscribe. Podcasts are typically about 15 minutes long. They are smart. They are funny. They are short. Subscribe where you listen to podcasts. And every Friday, and sometimes it drops Saturday, check out ADHD Essentials with Brendan Mahan. Brendan's podcast is kind of like this one, but with a focus on families, parents, and educators. Both Hacking Your ADHD and ADHD Essentials are both part of the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network, available to everyone, everywhere you consume podcasts. And in January 2021, we are launching 2 new pods with 2 fantastic ADHD women. One will be focused on intersectionality and diversity, and will be sharing her perspective as an Asian Canadian with ADHD. And our other pod will be aimed at those who identify as women, and you can meet both of them next month at our live Q&A. So join me and the host of Hacking Your ADHD, Will Curb, and the host of ADHD Essentials, Brendan Mahan, and Moira Mabin, and MJ Siemens for an hour of live Q&A next month on November 10th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Join and ask questions to our new panelists and come up with any ADHD-related questions you have. Go to ADHDrewired.com/events to register for this and all our upcoming live Q&As. We've added more live Q&As to register for in 2021. Join us every second Tuesday of the month at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern for an hour of live Q&A. Want to ask your question live? Please wear headphones and be in a quiet space. Register for free at ADHDrewired.com/events. That's ADHDrewired.com/events. So join us for our next live Q&A, Tuesday, November 10th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you there. We are back. So, all right. You are now just a couple months into discovering that you might have ADHD. You're now waiting for the evaluation. You decided that you were going to start an event company right before COVID started. It was going well until COVID started.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you recently decided that with one of your friends, you wanted to start a podcast.
Mm-hmm. It kind of came down to, I want to be more involved in the boxing community. And that was like, because I'm super shy person who's always being like, it always feels like, oh, it's me and then everyone else, and it kind of was a way to bridge that gap of, hey, I want to talk to you. You're really cool. You're talented. And it was that open space to be like, no judgment for either person. So it was more so like Abby creating a friend digital group.
Hey, can I ask you, when you're boxing, do you feel like it's this more emboldened, empowered version of you, or would you say it just feels more you?
I think it's kind of how I was wired to think. Like especially when I'm moving, because I'm really kinesthetic. That's something you need to do in boxing, whether you're moving your feet or your head or your arm, whatever, you're always moving. And that just brings out the thinking in me of like, oh my God, I have so many things to try and do. And just the whole aspect of it and how it's laid out is like, oh, I understand this,
Like everything's just kind of connecting when you're there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what does your brain feel like when you're in the ring?
I think first starting was really hard because you need to learn the basics, right? You need to go really slowly.
And you love going slow, right?
My coach has told me many times to slow down. Like, be more patient, and don't make those stupid mistakes. That's where you get caught, is when you're not taking your time. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Just let me go do it again. Like, I totally understand. So it's learning to kind of sit with that. And I think I'm trying to transfer it out of just, oh, I constantly need to be hitting someone, to I can constantly be moving. So whether that's fidgeting in a specific way, making them think I'm going to hit them, and reserving energy that way. But I think I'm trying to transfer that now of like, yeah, I can always be doing something, but in a more efficient way. And I don't have to feel like I'm limiting myself.
So it is transferring to other areas outside the ring.
Yes. Yeah.
Are you getting hit in the head?
A little bit.
A little bit. That's the one thing that really like concerns me when I hear someone's like in that kind of like physical contact sport. Like, because brain injury is a real thing.
It is. But in the sparring at the gym I'm at now, it's not to get beaten up or taken out. It's meant to learn. And I think I'm really good at blocking, which is like, it's a partial hit. It's not a full hit. But now I want to learn like a full, like non-contact, like the movement and the head, the whole footwork. You can be fidgeting, and, not get hit or set up a hit, So I think it's learning, because with myself, I always go a direct, really fast route, and it's not always the most best or efficient route. And sometimes I have to like circle back and be like, oh, that's what everyone was saying the whole time. Okay. So it's kind of one of those things of backtracking a little bit and being like, oh, that's what they mean by slowing down.
Slower is faster, kind of.
Yeah. Slower is faster.
You shared with me when we first spoke that when we were talking about like slow and fast, that you have a fear of driving.
Yeah. It took me 5 years to get my G2, which you can drive by yourself with your G2.
That's just like your driver's license. That's for us American folks.
Probably
like,
just
G2?
a normal valid G. Yeah. And then G1 is you can drive, but with someone else.
Okay. It's like a learner's permit.
Yeah. They go right away, 16, go get it. They're so excited. They're out driving. Me, I waited till I was 17. I just had no interest in it because the car is somewhere I go to daydream. When I get driven, that's like my happy place. I'm thinking all my thoughts. I'm being distracted, and it's okay. Whereas when you're driving, you have to be 100% focused or someone's going to die. Also, I had a lot of terrible driving instructors. They would always tell me like how driving is the most dangerous job and it's like a high fatality rate and all these things. So it didn't really help me feel at ease behind the wheel. And I think it just took me a lot longer than normal to get comfortable with like knowing my attention is kind of everywhere. And having to like mentally rev up and be like, yeah, I have to focus now. I have to drive, here to here and map out like the whole route. It's a whole thing. So I can do it. It's just harder.
Do you have a safer place where you can go daydream now? Like maybe the amazing blanket tent that you built to
that I have constructed.
So I just want all the listeners to know that Abby built this amazing blanket tent to do this podcast because was it because you have high vaulted ceilings and it was real echoey? Is that?
No, you told me somebody like you recorded was in a closet. I'm like, well, I can't be outbeat. I need to be in an intense thing. So. Yeah.
Oh, it's great. It is great. So, on your podcast, is just boxing now? You also said that, that you're thinking about also doing other kinds of content creation? Yeah.
So we're thinking, again, I have very different interests that do not connect together. So I'm passionate about music and singing. We're thinking about doing content related to that or releasing music videos or just something.
So you sing?
Yeah. I'm playing guitar as well. Thinking about possibly doing like a gaming thing where I naturally want to game for 10 hours, 15 hours. People get paid big money to do that now.
Yeah, they do. They do.
So why not?
So, what are you doing now? So from now until as you're waiting for this end of time,
end of this apocalypse. Yeah. Right now, I think I'm just trying to save as much money for that assessment, that good old assessment. Creating a plan for that, like a nice treatment plan. To move from coping to thriving. I think it's about time for that. And I also moved back home. So I was renting an apartment for a long time and the upkeep with that was too stressful. And I kind of wanted to, again, dial it back a little bit and reassess like, what is it that I want to do? And what direction do I want to go in? Because I've worked, tirelessly since I was like 15, and just constantly.
And you're 22 and now you're ready to retire.
Exactly. Thank you. That is my sentiment as well.
You got to find something that you love that doesn't feel like work.
Exactly.
And it really is. I mean, I think that is, I think for people without ADHD, like I think their superpower, being able to like do a job that they don't really like doing because it pays the bills and like and they can do the 9 to 5, right? Like I think most listeners like just can't do it. And if you can, at what cost, right? Like what are you
giving up? What sacrifice are you going to make?
So maybe you'll be the first singing, guitar playing, podcasting boxer who's gaming while boxing, singing songs, playing guitar.
Yeah, all at the same time.
Yeah,
why not?
Why not?
It's a new thing.
And once COVID is over, you can plan events all around those
things.
Yes,
yeah, that I'm interested in. Exactly. See, it all kind of relates to each other, right? It's not a bad thing.
It's one big circle that leads you back to being able to go to recess, so you don't have to do paperwork.
Yes. is my number one pet peeve.
Yes. I know I've said this before on the podcast, but I have an allergy to paperwork. I break out in piles and procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Also putting away laundry. I can wash it, I can clean it, but putting it away is also an allergy for me. So
want to tip?
Yes.
Just get 2 laundry baskets so you can just take one. So as you have your folded clean clothes.
Yes.
If it doesn't get put away, then you're just taking it piece by piece from the clean, and then you put it into another basket that's in the dirty.
It's a cycle.
Yeah.
And it works.
All right. So what is the name of your podcast?
It's called KO Origins.
KO Origins. Knockout Origins. Oh, so here's a question for you. We'll finish with this one. So on Nintendo, the original Nintendo, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Have you ever played it?
No.
Man. I recently, so my son has a Nintendo Switch, and you can get there's a thing you can get where you a ton of these Nintendo games for it. And it was just a blast. And you you're 22, so I'm twice as old, I think is about. Check it out. It's awesome. It's a lot of fun. And if you could figure out how to actually beat, I think they replaced Mike Tyson, after he bit someone's ear off. So some other character, but,
hey, he's coming back now. So
he's got his face tattoo and everything, it's in.
Yeah. Apparently the big news is that he's going to go against, I think it was Holyfield or something. There's a big new fight.
Isn't he a big pot entrepreneur now or something? Or is that someone else? He
has a Netflix show. He's got so much going on. So he had a hard life, though, to be fair. And he was dabbling in cocaine, so it didn't help.
That doesn't help things.
No. Mm-mm.
All right. Well, Abigail Dube podcast is KO. What'd you say it was?
KO Origins.
KO Origins.
Yeah.
I'm wait, it was on my paper somewhere. I lost it. Where was it? KO Origins. So check it out. Anything you want to leave listeners with?
Don't feel ashamed. Don't feel like you have to fit into other people's expectations. That's what I'm learning. It's kind of a waste of time, honestly.
Well, stay on the journey, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you.
You bet.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find summaries and additional resources for each episode. You can apply to our free and secret Facebook community. You can learn more about ADHD Rewired's intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups, and sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content you won't get anywhere else. It's all at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click the Patreon button. If you're a regular listener and you're still listening to my voice, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron through our Patreon page. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to listeners, but it is not free to produce. And patrons get really cool perks. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHDrewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. You can also subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube. And you can subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube and see select interviews and some other videos I've posted. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends and your family and your clients, as well as your coaches, therapists, and doctors. And if you're a coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader, and you would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at my website, ADHDrewired.com. And if you're a member of CHAD or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this podcast. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. You know, you might be the person that turns somebody on
to a podcast for the very first time. And if you really love this episode, please consider hitting share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I count on you to help me spread the message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and to help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or any other podcast app that accepts ratings and reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe on this podcast on your podcast app so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/ADHD rewired. Not sure where to start? In no particular order. Check out Atomic Habits by James Clear, The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk, 10% Happier, and Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. These are both by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions and Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Vaden. The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. Do you have trouble asking for help? Listen to The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. It's one of the best produced audiobooks I've ever heard. If you're looking for something a little bit more, say, magical, I unexpectedly fell in love with the Harry Potter series. And I don't usually listen to those kinds of books, and I loved it. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus yet, check out Brene Brown's books, starting with The Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader in any capacity, check out her 2018 book, Dare to Lead. And Brene still is my most wanted guest, so if you know Brene, and you would be so kind to make that connection for me, I would be really, really grateful. You know who else I would like to have on the show? You. Click the podcast tab at ADHDrewired.com and then click the Be a Guest button at the top of that page and schedule a 15-minute pre-interview. This is Eric Tivers, reminding you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting. Self-care is not selfish, and no matter what gets done or doesn't get done, at the end of the day, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.